Today is September the 9th, 2014. My name is Tanya Finchum, along with Alex Bishop, and we're with Oklahoma State University. And today we're in Oklahoma City to speak with Leora Henderson, and this is part of our Oklahoma 100-Year Life project, so thank you for having us today. Let's start with having you tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in a little town in the panhandle of Texas called Goodnight.
Good night. And when?
In 1908,
And the month?
May 4.
May 4 of 1908. What did your parents do for a living?
Well, my father was a preacher mostly, but we had a farm.
And what did they raise?
Cotton.
Cotton. Did you have to pick cotton?
Oh, yes, I was raised at the cotton patch.
Hard work or easy work?
I've always had hard work.
Hard work. Would you have to actually help them pick cotton,
Oh, yes.
even as a young girl?
Well, I started as a regular hand when I was about 8.
8. That's pretty young.
Everybody did then.
And would you get paid, or would it go to the...
Oh, my father would pay us a little bit sometimes.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I had 4 brothers and 2 sisters.
Okay. And where were you in the order?
I was 3rd from the top.
3rd from the top. Okay. And where did you go to elementary school?
Well, I started at a little school named Mesquite. Didn't go very much. I went to another little school called Lakeview. And that way I didn't go much. Then we went to Greer County, and we had a little school called Lake Creek. And that was where I graduated.
Okay. Greer County, so you moved to Oklahoma at some point?
Most of the time it was Oklahoma. I think I stayed in Oklahoma when I was about 13 and stayed the rest of the time.
So from Goodnight, Texas to Greer County, how did you get there?
Well, we went from Goodnight to Hall County. We went in a covered wagon, drawn by horses.
Uh,
That was common back then. We didn't have a lot of cars. Most doctors had cars when I was a little older, but none when I was real young.
do you remember much from that trip?
Well, I remember going from Hall County to Oklahoma, then I remember going back to Texas, where I grew up in Texas, and then I was 13 when I came back to Oklahoma.
Well, on the wagon trip, was it a long time, take a long trip?
Well, just from one place to the other, it seemed like a long time then, but it was only a few days, I think.
Well, did you get to ride, or would you have to walk?
No, we rode in the wagon. My father had a little stove called a bachelor stove that we had in the front of the wagon to keep us warm. It was wintertime usually when we traveled.
And what would your mother fix for food?
We had crackers and cheese a lot because there wasn't any way to cook. And just things that she could get out of a can that could be eaten.
Okay. So when you got to Greer County and started in that school, did it go through the 8th grade or through the 12th grade?
Well, I went through high school, yes.
High school, okay.
I went through high school and college.
Well, in the high school, I guess, how many kids were in your class?
I can't think. I think there's about 12 in the
So a small,
senior class.
that's a pretty small group.
The other classes, it was different all the time.
Well, describe the house that you grew up in.
Well, it was a little house, about 4 or 5 little rooms. We had a living room. You wouldn't believe it, there were 10 of us at one time living in those little houses.
You had to like each other.
The what?
You had to like each other.
Can you imagine my mother cooking 3 meals a day on a wood stove for 10 people?
No.
And that's what she did.
And where would you all sleep?
Well, we all had beds. Sometimes we'd have 2 or 3 beds in a room. My sister and I usually had, and my grandparents usually had a room to ourselves.
And the bathroom, I'm assuming, was outside?
It was.
It was.
So,
Would your mother have a big garden?
had a big what?
Garden?
Oh yeah, we raised most of our food.
And she canned?
She would can lots and lots of cans. And we'd buy peaches. We would can over 100 jars a year.
Well,
'Cause it took a lot of food for 10 people.
sure. And would she sew?
The what?
Did she sew?
Oh yes, she made all of our clothes.
Where would she get her fabric?
Well, we had little stores. One of them was called Granite, and one was called Mancom. It's down in Greer County.
Okay.
Those little towns still exist.
They do.
My school's gone, but the towns are still there.
Well, did your father grow cotton when you came to Oklahoma
What
too?
did he do?
Did he grow cotton still when he was in Greer County?
Oh yes, that's why we made our living.
Okay.
He was gone a lot of times. He held meetings, and always had a church.
So he preached and he farmed. Preached it
Oh yeah,
and farmed.
What church did he preach in?
Baptist. Do you want the name of the church?
Yeah, yeah.
If you know.
Were you growing in, do you know Greer County?
I don't.
I can't think of the little churches. One of them was Willa. We lived in a little place called, well, our school was called Lake Creek, and there was a church there. We had that little church at Lake Creek for a long, long time.
Did you?
Started out as a one-room church, and it grew and grew. Pretty good-sized church now, I understand.
Would you sing in the choir?
I didn't have a choir voice, but I did sometimes.
Well, did your mother work outside of the home?
No. With 6 children and a grandmother and grandfather, she didn't have time to work anywhere else.
Well, about that time, 1919, 18, the flu came through. Did it impact your family any? The flu epidemic?
In 1918,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we all had the flu.
Did
That year I missed almost all school. I had whooping cough and the flu the same year.
you?
So I didn't get my schooling that year.
Did the doctor make house calls?
They did, but it was too far. We didn't have them to come out then. It'd be too far.
Did anyone you know go to the World War I?
Did anyone I know what?
Go to World War I?
Yeah, there was a bunch of people around home did, and I had one uncle that went to World War I. Yeah, that's pretty vivid in my mind. I remember a lot about that war. Because it affected us so much. and we'd run out of food. They didn't have it in the grocery stores. We ran out of flour. The whole county did. We could, I guess, we couldn't get it at the stores anymore. So we had cornbread breakfast, dinner, night. So it was, life wasn't easy back then, at least for us.
Well, did he make it back?
But to make what?
Did he make it back, your uncle?
Oh yes, he came back.
He came back.
He didn't get any into the big wars. He was a preacher too, and I think he did a lot of preaching while he was old. He did go to France.
So when did you graduate from high school?
In 1928.
About the time the Depression was starting.
At the time of what?
Of the Depression start?
Yes. And I went to college through the Depression. I had to miss several years. And then went to college. Finally got a job and worked my way through, so not too many people in my class got to go to college. It was just that our life was hard. And they knew they couldn't go to college, so the girls would get married early.
Well, how did you manage to go to college?
Well, my sister was a school teacher. She sent me the first year. Then I got a job, and the rest of the time worked my way through college in a school library.
Okay. And what college did you go to?
Well, it was called Central State then, but I don't know what it's called now. It's in Edmond, Oklahoma.
University of Central Oklahoma, UCO?
Uh-huh.
So how long did it take you to get through?
Just about 4 years.
Okay. And you worked in the library the entire time?
Uh-huh.
And where did you live?
What to do?
Where did you live?
Well, we didn't have dormitories at that time, so I had to live at a boarding house. Not really a boarding house, it was a family home, and they kept students. They had the upstairs. I don't think they ever came upstairs. They had about 3 or 4 rooms upstairs and a kitchen, and we did our own cooking most of the time.
Well, would you get to go home some?
I'd go home on Christmas, and that was it.
And how would you get there?
Well, my dad had a car, an old car.
Okay, by that time.
It'd take forever to go anywhere in it.
Roads probably weren't too good either, were they?
The what?
The roads were probably not very good.
The roads were just dirt roads. We did have a few paved. Highway 66 was built during the time I was in college, and we came home part of the way. We couldn't come all the way on the highway because it didn't run through, I've forgotten how many miles, 20 or 30 miles north of us. So we had to come the rest of the way on dirt roads.
Well, so you became a teacher?
Did I
You
what?
became a teacher?
No, I never did teach. Right at the last of college, I got married then
How did you meet your husband?
in school.
So he was a teacher?
He was a teacher, yes, for a while. And first 5 or 6 years, then he got a job here in Oklahoma City.
So you moved to Oklahoma City in the early 40s-ish?
All this time, I don't know, 30 or 40 years.
Well, when you moved here, what did he do if he didn't teach?
What do with what?
What did your husband do when he moved here?
He left from teaching. He taught until he moved here.
And then what did he do?
He worked at a grocery store.
Okay.
He was produce manager at a grocery store.
And did you work?
I worked after the children were not grown, but up in high school started working as a school secretary.
Okay.
And I worked as a school secretary for 20 years.
Education was an important part then.
Yeah, I was with children a lot, and I enjoyed that.
How many children? Boys, girls?
2 girls.
2 girls.
Well, what was the Depression like during that time?
Well, it was pretty rough. There was very little money. Would you believe my husband worked at a grocery store for $15 a week, and that's what we lived on. We paid rent, we bought our groceries, and all of our expenses on $15 a week.
Had to be a good budgeter.
The what?
You had to be a good budgeter, money manager.
We had no extra money, very little.
Very low.
See, Greer County
But
is
we
where the Dust
managed
Bowl
it.
was.
And I had $2 at that time.
What about the Dust Bowl? Were you in the Dust Bowl any?
You know, they talk about the Dust Bowls, but I grew up in Greer County where we had sandstorms every summer, and I can't remember which one they call the Dust Bowl. I've heard of the Dust Bowl for years, and everybody asked me that. And I was in so many, I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, what would you do during a sandstorm?
Mostly stay in the house. It was too rough to get out. And I had been riding in a car where you couldn't see it. It looked like a snowstorm. You couldn't see any better than you could in a big snowstorm. And turning a corner, you couldn't see the corner.
Mercy.
Oh, the sand was terrible.
How would they keep it out of the house?
We didn't. There's no way you could keep it out of the house. People that had bigger and better houses than we did had the sand in it too. You just couldn't keep it out.
Would they have to do anything special in the kitchen to try to keep it out?
You washed your dishes before you set the table. Yeah, and sometimes you'd find sand in your food, you'd be gritty. It's just impossible to keep it out.
Would all 10 of you be around the dinner table?
The what?
Would all 10 of you be around the dinner table?
When I was little, as we got older, of course, they dropped out. Yeah, we had 10 around the table for a long time.
What was one of your favorite dishes your mother fixed?
Well, she could cook anything, but no, for generally we had potatoes and beans, some kind of meat all the time. We'd grow the beans and potatoes, can the green beans during the summer. And we had canned lots of tomatoes.
Was she a member of a Homemaker club?
Yes, she was for a while. It was hard because we didn't have a car at that time. And wagons weren't very fast. We did have a buggy at times, and we'd go in the buggy, but most of the time we went where we wanted to go in the wagon.
So how many horses would you have?
We had 6 or 8. Because we'd have 2 for the plows, 2 for the wagons. We had about 4 that we used on the wagon. And then several others. We'd have 6 or 8 horses all the time. And the cows too. We milked our own cows.
You milked?
Oh, sure.
Was that hard to learn how to do?
Yeah, because you have to do your head a certain way, and that certain way was kind of hard. I finally learned it.
What were some of your chores?
Chopping wood, and then tending to the. I didn't do much shopping. I had to pick the wood up and carry it in the house. But watering chickens and taking care of the chickens was mostly my job.
Gathering the eggs?
I had to hunt the eggs, and hens would make nests out in out in the pasture, or anywhere close, within a quarter of a mile, you'd find hen nests. They didn't like the hen house; they liked the outside.
So you'd have to go on an egg hunt.
Oh yeah, we hunted eggs every evening. We'd listen to where the hens would cackle, and then we'd go, and most of the time we could find her nest. We had shenry, what they call shenry. Do you know what that is? Well, it's a miniature oak. It doesn't grow but 6 or 8 feet high, and it's just a little tiny oak tree. Only they come in bunches. They grow in. They have acorns, and they spread easily.
And the chickens would roost in those?
The chickens would get in those patches of shenry, and we'd have to work our way through them. Because they grew so close together, you had to push your way through so much. You wouldn't imagine what country life was like.
No. Well, did your mother have some home remedies?
Oh, we had all kinds of home remedies. When you had an earache, you got a bag of hot salt, put on your ear, you lay on that. That was our most common thing, I think. At least all of us had earaches.
And did it work?
Did I work?
Did it work? Did the salt on the ear work?
I never could tell when it worked. My ear still hurt.
Well, did you have to worry about snakes and snake bites?
About what?
Snakes?
Snakes?
Mm-hmm.
That was well, my mother and I were both scared of snakes. Boys would handle the snakes for us. We didn't have a lot of rattlesnakes, but we did have some. Most of them was what we'd call chicken snakes, and they would crawl into the chicken nest and get the eggs. You'd have to watch the hens, and they'd get our little chickens.
Whose job was it to kill the chickens when it was time to cook them?
Did I what now?
Who killed the chickens when it was time to do that?
Well, I think all of us did.
Did you?
I know I'd go out and run a chicken down, kill it, and cook it. I could outrun them, but they got tired.
Well, how would you get to school?
We had school bus.
Really?
At times, when we were little, we had to walk, but when we moved to Greer County, we had school buses. Sometimes, at first, they were drawn by horses, but then we got some that had a motor. Can you imagine riding to school in a school bus drawn by horses?
No.
We lived 6 miles from the school, so we went 6 miles. We'd have to get up. We'd have to get up at 5 or 6 o'clock and get ready to catch the bus early because our bus driver had 2 great big horses that he kind of, I think he idolized those horses. He wouldn't make them go very fast. He took care of those horses on the route. We went slow.
About how long would it take you to go 6 miles?
It'd take more than an hour sometimes.
Wow.
So you can imagine getting up, getting on the bus. We'd get on the bus around 7 o'clock every morning. It wasn't easy.
No, and in the wintertime, was it cold on the bus?
Oh, yes. He had a little stove he kept in the front of the wagon that gave a little bit of heat. A little wood stove.
And what would you do for lunch?
We carried it in a paper sack to school.
What would it be?
Well, it'd be mostly sandwiches. With anything we happened to have.
Did you have a favorite subject?
Did ever what?
A favorite subject? Favorite class?
In school.
Mm-hmm.
I think I liked English and history.
Did you play on any sports? Did you play sports?
I was on the second team of basketball. At least I was on the practice team. But I never did get to play in a real basketball game. As I said, my dad was a preacher. He would not let me wear the uniform. I made the team every year, but I couldn't go with them.
Well, what was the uniform? What was the uniform?
Well, at first they were just bloomers, and then they got to be real short shorts. So,
And your father wouldn't let you wear either one?
well, I was too little when they wore the bloomers. I wasn't old enough for the basketball team.
What were holidays like growing up?
What was what?
Holidays like?
We didn't have to go to school. That's just, we usually had a big dinner or something like that. But we didn't celebrate holidays like they do now. At least out in the country where we live, they didn't.
Well, would school let out for cotton picking time?
Yeah, we'd go to school through August and September, and then they'd let out school through October, sometimes November if we didn't get all the cotton up. We'd go to school 2 months in the summer, and then out about 2 months and go back to school, start over again.
Well, would you go to the cotton gin with your father?
I did one time, and it was not good. He knew it wouldn't be good. I didn't like the gin, and I didn't like all the dust, and I didn't like staying away from the activity. I stayed in the wagon. So he only let me go one time, I think, because I begged so much he'd take the boys, but he wouldn't take me.
I've never been in a cotton gin. Can you tell us anything else about that?
Oh, I was pretty little. You're asking me to tell you something 80 years, 90 years ago.
That's okay if you don't remember, that's fine.
I remember the yard, I remember the cotton wagons, and I remember the noise of the gin. But that's all I can remember about it.
Okay. So there were things that girls could do and boys could do.
Oh, we had parties all the time. And we played snap.
I don't know what that is.
Well, it's kind of a running game. And at school we played blackman all the time.
black bin?
That was a race. We'd we'd divide, one group would at one end and one the other, and then we'd try to run the fastest. So we always had running games on the school ground. Wasn't anything else to do. One school we had some swings for a while, but they'd keep breaking and we'd fall, and they took them down. Then we had some seesaws, and that was about the only activity on the school ground. We'd all, whichever of us as could, would get on the seesaws. And when we couldn't get on it, we'd play backgammon. It was quite different than it is now.
Right.
I don't know what they do in the country schools. I think they have a gym even, and have I think they have school teachers that take care of the activity anymore.
Mm-hmm. They consolidated a lot of them. Yeah.
But I wouldn't know now because, well, I worked in a school for 20 years, and we had seesaws and swings on the school ground. I worked at Buchanan School. You know where that is?
I don't.
It's not very far from here. It's out in the country.
Do you remember voting for the first time?
Working?
Voting?
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember them talking about, I remember when women could vote for the first time. And that was quite a topic for people that came. They always talked about the women voting. And you know, most of the men were against it. They didn't want women to vote. They weren't supposed to take care of government. Men were supposed to do those things.
That was like 1920, around in there, 1920.
Well, what about World War II? What,
World War II, World War One. I'm thinking about, I think, 1918. That's when World War One was. And World War II, yeah, I remember it real well.
what were you doing at the time?
My husband was a school teacher. And that's when the children were little. It wasn't a lot different than life anyway. Salaries went up, prices went up. So it was, you'd go to town, go down the street, you wouldn't see any men walking the streets. You'd go when the towns were crowded, there'd be no men. So we lived here in Oklahoma City.
Did you have to do rationing then?
Oh, yes. Did a lot of rationing. On the gasoline and oil, especially on cars. Not too much food was rationed. I hadn't thought too much about it lately. You'd go downtown, walk down the street, everybody would be women. And you just wouldn't see any men. I remember after the Armistice was signed and walked downtown and saw men for the first time out there filling the streets. And that was quite a different thing.
Did you have any family in World War II? Any?
I had a brother. He was killed in the Army. I had two brothers. The other one came home. But my youngest brother was killed in the Army. My other two brothers took government jobs. They were both 4F, and they just couldn't stand it because they were 4F. One of them did go in the, well, my youngest brother went into the Army. One brother went through the war in the Army. He lived in El Paso. He worked for the government all the time through the war, and I think he worked for the government afterwards. But he was a little older than they take, so he tried to join twice. He said they would take him twice, he wouldn't go back. He would try again.
Now, the one who was killed was a Marine.
Well, I can't hear you.
Ovid was a Marine, rather than in the Army, wasn't he?
Yeah, my youngest brother was in the Marines. And he was killed just about the time the war started. One of the first ones that lost his life.
What was his name?
Ovid Walter Campbell.
Campbell. First name was?
Ovid, O-V-I-D.
That's different too. Your mother came up with some different names.
Oh yeah, that's what they did to us. And when he was in high school, he changed his name to Walter. And so he went through the Army in high school, called Walter. Yeah, he dropped the Ovid altogether.
And Leora, where did they get that?
I think she saw it in a paper or something. She saw that somewhere. And she'd never heard anybody named Leora before. And I have never learned a Leora.
I have not either.
But there has been one here in Oklahoma City, not far from here, because one of the therapists that I had both of us for patients. And she kept telling me about the other Leora.
Well, what were your other names for your brothers and sisters?
Well, I had one brother named Troy, one Lloyd, one Lindsay, and one Ovid.
Okay.
I had two sisters. One was named Jean, the other one Letha.
Letha.
So there were 7 of us altogether. But Letha and Lloyd were older. They weren't home very much when Jean was a baby.
When you were raising your children, did you ever take any vacations? Any family vacations?
No, we didn't. It just wasn't any time or any money either to take vacations. Once in a while, one would get to go by themselves, and sometimes it'd be Mama and Dad, sometimes it'd be one of us, but not the whole family.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the things that you did when you were a parent?
When I was married,
When you were married and a parent, were there any things that you did for family fun that you remember?
some things after we moved to Oklahoma City when I think Joanne was about 2 years old. We moved to Oklahoma City, and I was pretty well tied down, so we didn't go on vacations. We just did things at home. We'd play little games in the house, and then in the summer we played outside. But nothing spectacular. And we had games that we'd play, mostly domino games. We never play cards much. We had a 42 club at our church. A bunch of the members formed a little club. We'd play 42 every week.
What's 42?
It's just a domino game that you play with dominoes. No betting. You think of games like that as gambling games, but they weren't.
No.
And we played a few card games that was no gambling at all. Because I never did learn the gambling games. I didn't learn the others very well.
Now, given that your father was a preacher, was church always a central part of your life?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We came to Oklahoma City. First thing we did, we hunted a church. We found all of it, and that's what I still remember of. I've been there over 70 years.
I bet you're their oldest member.
What?
I bet you are their oldest member.
No, there are, well, maybe I am there, yes. I haven't been to church in over a year, and it just really upsets me, because I always went to church. That was a major part of my life. So it's been over a year since I had that stroke. I think it's been 2 years, and I haven't been able to walk since.
Well, there was a time when you couldn't wear pants to church.
We could when I was going last. They still can.
But when you were younger,
When I was younger, no.
no.
No, children were grown and gone before I ever wore pants to school and church.
Church.
Not very much then.
Felt strange to do that, didn't it?
Uh-huh. For a while, everybody did. Now, I don't know whether they do now or not.
It's a mix.
It's been over 2 years since I've been in a church building.
Now, I assume as a child that you heard your father preach.
Did
you ever hear your father preach?
Oh, yeah, lots of times.
Did you ever have a favorite sermon or a favorite?
I remember a lot of things he said when he was preaching, because we had to grow up like he preached. Yeah, he was pretty strict with us as we were growing up.
What's something you remember him saying or preaching about?
Oh, so many things. He quoted lots of scripture. He told a lot of stories. And his sermons were very much like the sermons you hear today.
Tell them about the weddings.
The what?
The weddings he performed.
Yeah, he had weddings. One time I was at the cotton patch, and a couple came out, and the ones that we knew wanted to know where we could find a preacher. And my dad was over in a little while, had a cotton sack on his shoulder. So I got him. He pulled his cotton sack off and his kneecaps and went over to the wagon where they were and buried them out there in the wagon. Another time we were on our way to the river to fish. We all had our fishing clothes on, and we were about 200 or 300 yards from the road, and they called us back from the car. Dad married a couple out there on the road.
Now, did he marry you and your husband?
Yes, he did. And they'd come to the house lots of times. They'd come to our house to get married. You'd marry them sitting in the car, or it was different back then when I was a child.
Now, did you get married in the church or a car or
I was married at home, in my home. My dad married me.
in your home? And who was there? Were all the family present?
Just family members. We didn't have any friends or anybody. I don't think they knew it because I was just coming home from college, and they had to meet me at the school and take me home, and we just got home and was married that night.
Now, did your husband ask your father for your hand in marriage?
I don't think he did because we were engaged at college.
How did he pop the question?
Yeah, I had a very short. He did the regular questions that you have to have, but it was a very short ceremony. He said he'd never do that again. He was actually nervous when he married us. I thought it'd be just real comedy. He'd married so many couples. We were coming home in those old cars, and it was after dark when we got there. We had so many flats, and in those days they could you could mend your flats. You can't now, but they'd take the tire off and we'd have a uniform. Not a uniform, what am I trying to say? Anyway, we'd had a rubber inner tire inside the other one. You've seen the old tires, haven't you?
The inner
With the
tube.
inner tube.
They would have to, they had all the equipment to fix the holes in the inner tube. I think we had 7 on the way home. It was hard to buy tires when you didn't have any money. And they didn't pay teachers much after this. Would you believe he got $90 a month? The first salaries were $90 a month. After he taught a year or two, they raised it to $100. We lived on that. But then that was, when my sister started teaching, she got $75 a month, her first salaries. So you see how much they used to pay teachers?
Yes.
Now you can live on a teacher's salary. You couldn't back then.
So how did you celebrate your most recent birthday?
In bed.
In bed.
Unconscious.
Did you ever think you would live to be 100 or over 100?
Well, that was my intention, to live to 110. When we were kids, we'd talk to each other about how old we were going to be, and I was always 110.
Has anyone in your family lived to be 100?
Did they what?
Did anybody in your family ever live to be 100 other
No,
than you?
Not that I know of, not my grandparents, or I think I'm the only one that I've ever known of that lived to be 100.
So you have 4 more years to go.
Yeah. 3 more, I'm 107. Oh, I have a 6 yet. I think I was 107 last May.
You're 106.
106.
Mhm.
Yeah, on your birthday. Yeah.
So I know I'm 106. I guess I'm just 106.
Just.
I forget real easily. You tell me something one minute and I'll forget it the next.
What's a typical day like for you today? What time do you usually get up, and what do you do during the day, and what time do you go to bed?
I have breakfast about 10 usually. Because I don't wake up, no one wakes me up. So I sleep as long as I want to. Sometimes I get up, sometimes I don't. But they just let me stay in bed as long as I want to in the morning.
And you have breakfast, and then what do you do during the day?
Nothing.
Do you read?
I can't read anymore. I used to read all the time, but I can't see anymore to read.
What was your favorite thing to read?
Well, I read novels, a lot of them.
Read the Bible through quite a bit.
I didn't hear this.
She said you read the Bible quite a bit. And then what time would you go to bed?
I was in bed between 8 and 10, whichever time they got ready to get me to bed.
Would you read a lot as a youngster?
Yeah, that was our main activity. Our whole family would read. And at night we had kerosene lamps. We had a little table and we'd sit in the middle of the floor. And we'd all sit around that little table and read night after night.
Read out loud or to yourself?
Mostly to ourselves. Sometimes we'd find something interested that they wanted to read. It wasn't all of us here.
Where would you get your books?
I don't remember. I know they had a lot of them. But it's got, oh, I know now. We would order our books from the state library. They get them through the state. I guess they still have that program.
They do.
But we ordered a lot of them through there. And of course, we'd have to send them back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had school libraries that we would get them. And we had one library in Granite, I believe we'd get books. And then some of us read papers. I can't remember when we did get a daily paper. I know when I was first married, we lived in a little town called Blue Jacket. Do you know where that is?
I do.
I don't, but I've heard of it.
It's out close to Vanilla, Miami, Oklahoma. And we did read a lot, and I was trying to think of that. It wasn't Billy Graham. It was a missionary before Billy Graham. I can't think of his name right now.
Billy Sunday.
That was who?
Billy Sunday?
Well, it was Billy Sunday's time, but there was another one. He was there too. And they preached a lot of sermons, and they'd be printed in the newspaper. And when Mother, Dad, or Mother would read those sermons to us at night. But it was Billy Grundy's time. It was, and I can't think of his name. Billy Sunday.
How was the house heated?
That was what?
The house heated when you were little?
It was work. We had you've seen the brooms in the store. I'm sure you never had one at home. We used those to sweep with. Of course, we had to dust and sweep every day. And we didn't have running water for dishwater. We'd have to carry it from the well. fact, we didn't have running water at all. We had well water. And that came in a big bucket.
How was bath time then?
This one,
Bath time.
a pan of water and a wash rag. Sometimes we'd put water in tubs, but they're kind of hard to sit in.
And how would she do her laundry, your mother?
In a wash tub and a rub board. We didn't have washing machines. We didn't have electricity. Now it's not much difference in the country as it is in town because there's electricity everywhere now. And of course, when I was young, they didn't have electricity in the country.
No. Would you go to the movies very much?
Did I what?
Go to the movies? Theater? Movies?
We'd seldom ever go. Once in a great while, we'd get to go to a movie. They had them at Mangum and Granite both, but we didn't go to them. We finally got a radio when I was in college. First time, my first year, I came home from college, they had a radio at home. They had told me they were going to surprise me, and they did. So we had those old-fashioned shows on radio. We got the news on radio. That's the thing we watched more than anything else. But we had learned to have the news from everywhere. We were just really thrilled to get fresh news like that because we had always gotten it from a paper. We always took a daily paper. I can't remember a time in our home when we didn't have a daily newspaper. Sometimes it would be late because it'd have to come through the mail. But it was there. Sometimes we'd get to it at a time. Sometimes we'd miss it altogether.
Was there a particular section of the paper you enjoyed reading the most?
The comics.
The comics? What was your favorite comic?
Well, Buck and Jeff and Jigs. And then we had another one, I can't think of the name of it. It's about two little naughty boys.
The greatest invention that you've seen in your lifetime?
Convention.
Invention.
Oh, inventions. I remember my first car ride. We had cars, and then all the farm equipment was equipped. And after I quit picking cotton, they actually have a cotton picker. And I never did get to use that
You were finished.
after I got married. Left home. No, I never did go back to the farm after I was married, just to visit them. Very short visits. In those days, there wasn't any money. At least we didn't have any.
You remember your first television?
The first time I came home from college, I walked in the room and they had a television.
Not a television.
Television or radio? Television.
We had a radio all the time. I can't remember when we didn't have radios. Because I remember when I was quite young. But I remember our first television. They got kind of popular while I was in school, and neighbors started buying them, and I'd hear about the television. And the house where I was staying bought a television. That was something.
I think so.
Radios instead of television?
Yeah, because I was 10 years old before we had a television.
Yeah, Sierra probably remembers our first television.
Yeah.
And today, do you have a philosophy or a motto?
I do what now?
Do you have a philosophy or a motto that you live by?
Oh, I didn't understand what you said.
Do you,
Have a what?
a philosophy or a motto that you live by?
That I would buy?
Well,
I'm sorry, I
Go
get
ahead.
it.
do you have a philosophy of life or a motto in life?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I did. I was going to be a school teacher. And I have a certificate, life certificate, to
But-
teach school, and I never used it.
But today, at 106 years of age, do you have a philosophy that you live by?
That I live by?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's my religious training. Because I've been taught religious. So I was given 2 Bibles the other while back, and I read both of them just right through. I can't read now.
And what do you think the secret to your long life is?
The secret to my life?
Living so long.
Well, everybody tells me it's because I never did drink or anything like that. So I don't know. My mother died at 83, and my father was, I think he was 97. So we never had alcohol in our home, and I never smoked. So I don't know whether that had anything to do with it or not. Some people just don't die. That's the main reason.
That's when history is written, what do you want it to say about you?
What do I want history to say about me? I want them to forget me. I don't think I want to be in the histories because I didn't accomplish any spectacular things.
Well, how do you want others to remember you?
Well, just as a grandmother, I guess. Grandmothers are nearly all alike. No, I really want them to remember as a good mother, if they can. Because I never accomplished anything spectacular. I was just a mother, just part of the time a working wife. Yeah, my husband died a long time ago.
Would you like a drink, Mother?
Thank you. You
No,
thought,
no, I was going to make sure you didn't spill it. You're doing good. He's done great.
thank you.
You're welcome.
You have a favorite memory or two from your childhood?
I don't think it's something that I'm proud of or anything, but I remember my first and only bad accident, not for me, but for somebody else. It was on one Sunday afternoon. My dad and oldest sister had gone out, of the community to another church. And here came a wagon running horses were running, and they turned into our drive and stopped at our lot. We ran out, and the man was under the wagon, under the wagon with his leg in a wheel going round, 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 just twisted it. And that's the worst tragedy I ever saw. And I guess maybe it's because I was just about 10 years old when it happened. And it was on Sunday. No one was home. My mother took worked that leg out of that wheel, laid him down, and there he was, bleeding and lying on the floor, on the ground. And we had him that way, covered up. It was a hot summer. We covered him, held a sheet up over him, our wagon sheet, to keep the sun off of him for hours. Finally, people started coming home from church. And after they got home from church, it seemed like the whole crowd came. And there, I finally got, I was standing by the side of him holding a sheet up to put the shade on him so he wouldn't be in the hot sun. And finally they came and I ran in the house and kind of hid. I couldn't take it any longer. They finally the family came and they got a car. I believe they got somebody's car. Somebody took them 20 miles to the little town where there was a hospital. Of course, he lost his leg. He stayed, but I think that's the worst tragedy I ever saw. I know I haven't seen one worse since. But seeing a man lose his leg is pretty good.
That's pretty hard.
Pretty bad. And he lay there. He moaned a little, but he didn't holler or anything. He just lay there and took the pain all that time. And it must have been a couple of hours before anybody came to our aid. That was tragic. I think everything about that stands out in memory so much because it was the only really tragedy I ever saw.
And you didn't want to be a nurse after that?
I intended to be a nurse, but then time changed and I decided to be a school teacher. So I went through college, had my degree in my teaching certificate, lifetime teaching certificate, got married, didn't go. I never taught. I've done quite a bit of substitute teaching, but never had a school.
Did you teach Sunday school?
You know, I taught Sunday school, same class of 7-year-olds for 40 years.
Wow.
So there's your teaching.
All of it Baptist Church.
So you were a teacher.
I worked in the school. I was school secretary. I was at Buchanan. You know where Buchanan is? I worked in Buchanan for 20 years.
Teaching 7-year-olds for 40 years, though, takes a lot of patience.
I taught 7-year-olds in Sunday school for 40 years.
It's a lot of patience.
So everybody in church knew me from the time they were growing, the time they were little. I've been in all of it for 70 years.
And you didn't sing in their choir either?
I did what?
Didn't sing in their choir either?
No, I didn't have a choir voice.
Didn't the
I
choir
always
one way?
wanted to, but I never could.
You sometimes should play piano.
Did you play the piano?
I played a little while. I played for our Sunday school department, and I did play for the church one time at night when no one else was there.
How had you learned how to play?
Somebody gave me a book, and I was in my teens. Gave me a textbooks on playing, and I taught myself.
Hmm.
I think as I was older, I had a few lessons, but not more than 10 in all.
Hmm.
So I was self-taught.
Okay, important.
You can do it if you want to. Anybody can learn if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to. I remember the first song I learned to play.
What was it?
I think it was Amazing Grace. It was a little short one, and it was in a good key. It was hard for me to play the keys. I went through the third 3 flats, about 3 sharps, but I never did get through the higher keys. Well, I could do it on the piano. I could do as much as 5, but not good. So I never was a real pianist. I just learned. My daughter had a perfect ear, good ear. She learned to play the piano young. She's played in a lot of churches. In fact, she still plays in the church. But I never did have that kind of an ear. I could hear the sounds. I knew the sounds of music, but I couldn't play them. She had perfect pitch.
Did they have traveling revivals back in those days? Do you remember many?
Oh yeah, my dad went on one every year. Well, not traveling, but he'd go to another church. And in the summertime, he'd hold meetings in several different churches.
Tent revivals?
What?
A tent revival?
Sometimes every week, sometimes every 10 or 12 days, sometimes 2 weeks. So he was gone most of the summer. And sometimes he'd be at a home church and he'd get to go every night.
You want to wrap up? Well, what advice would you give someone that wanted to live to be 100?
I'm sorry.
What advice would you give to someone who wanted to be 100?
Oh, I don't know. I think I was a small child. Well, I didn't really want to be. It was just play, and we would all. I think we all played that.
What advice would you give someone who wants to live 100 years?
What is it like when you get there?
What advice? What type of advice would you give?
Don't drink and don't take drugs. That's the main thing. I think that causes more trouble than anything I know of.
And read the funnies.
But
And read the comics.
read the comics and read the Bible. And just don't be a shoplifter, which so many kids are. Just be good, that's all. That describes it.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. So thank you for talking with us today.
Well, I've enjoyed you.
It was great. Thank you.